See. So hi, everyone. Thank you so much for being here today. We'll just start with the last panel of the day, which is entitled Community Power, Efforts to Meet the Need. And really the purpose of this last conversation is to synthesize everything that we've learned today and invite you to think about ways that you can collaborate with individuals in community in meeting the needs and working with community members to build power. So it's a very tall order and we have about an hour. If you're able to stay a little bit longer, we may run a little past 3 o'clock. We'll try not to keep people later than 3:15. If you're not able to stay, please know that this is a recorded session, just like the other sessions of the day, and welcome you to watch afterwards. We have a very illustrious panel today, and I will just very briefly introduce them, but then ask them to share more information about themselves and what they do, as their work is so critical to the conversations that we've had today. So to my immediate left, Adriana Cerillo, community organizer and member of the Minneapolis Public School Board. Ana Potrata Costa, associate professor at Mitchell Hamlin Law School and immigration attorney. Dr. Haitham Hassan, associate professor in neurology at the University of Minnesota Medical School. And at the end, we have one substitution, Emilia Gonzalez Avalos, who is the executive director of Unidos Minnesota, and this year a recipient of the Bush Fellowship. So congratulations, Emilia. Wonderful. So really very grateful to have you all here today, and just kind of want to give a little bit of orientation and context for the day and then for this panel too, before I turn it over to our speakers. I know that Mayors Fry and Carter did talk about the Journey to Belonging report, the Journey to Belonging in the Twin Cities. And the bullet points that are sort of framing our discussion today draw from that report. So this report was a multi-jurisdictional initiative that included the cities of Minneapolis and St. Paul, the Minneapolis Regional Chamber, the St. Paul Chamber, and a large advisory committee of stakeholders working on immigrant and refugee inclusion in the Twin Cities area and beyond. And some of the framing of this panel this afternoon really touch on goals and strategies which are identified in the report. So I invite you all to take a moment to look at it. I see some people in the audience already have it. There are some copies at the front desk if you haven't had an opportunity to pick one up. This panel, as I indicated, what we've learned throughout the day. The report really focuses on an awareness and creation of culturally appropriate and linguistically competent services, training on trauma-informed care and basic health information, reduction of bias and improvement of healthcare outcomes, again, with the greater goal of meeting community needs in a way that is culturally appropriate and linguistically competent, and also building community power. Our afternoon panelists will identify challenges that they see and how they're meeting them, share opportunities for collaboration, and we'll leave a little bit of time at the end for closing thoughts and questions from the audience. So we also invite you to stay connected on these topics, including and connecting with the speakers today, not just on this panel, but over the course of the day. So with that as an introduction, I'll turn it over to Adriana Cerillo to talk a little bit about herself and her work in the context of this panel today.
Gracias, Michelle. It's an honor to be here with you all. My name is Adriana Cerillo. I am originally from Mexico. I am a mother, I'm an activist, I am a grandmother as well. And I recently got elected to the school board in Minneapolis. I am the very first Mexican to ever be elected. And we went from shutting down the school board meetings precisely to ask and demand for equity for our brown and Black students. I was born in Mexico. We moved to the US in 1988. And the reason that we did is because my youngest brother is a US citizen and he was in need of special education services. So as a teenager, I was not very happy with my mother. I'll be very honest. I became immediately undocumented, and I finished my high school in Texas. I moved to Florida where I got married and I've had my children. In 2006, I was introduced to a young mother of three who was in the hospital and she was in need of medical assistance. And while I was looking for options, they kicked her out of the hospital. And I was going to college at the time. And I got together with some friends and we decided to start a nonprofit to help her and her children. And not knowing what we were doing, but understanding and having the passion to help her, we started a nonprofit in her honor, the Juliana Mateo Foundation for Disabled Farm Workers. And ever since, I have not stopped advocating, fighting to bring forward policies for undocumented and refugees communities. I've been in Minnesota for the last 9 years, and I love Minneapolis because it is a place where I feel that it has provided me the opportunity to fully thrive and to improve the conditions for our communities. And like I mentioned, I decided to run for school board because I'm raising two of my nephews whose mother self-deported as well. And through them, I got to see all the challenges that our educational system faces. So to me, it is personal. I've been very politically active because at the end of the day, it's not only winning a seat at the table, but winning the majority in order to pass forward policies, ordinances, whatever it is, to protect our communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Adriana. Anna, please.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Anna Patratz Acosta, and I'm an assistant professor at Mitchell Hamlin School of Law across the river in St. Paul. But with respect to this panel, I want to talk a little bit about the clinic I teach at Mitchell Hamlin, which uses a medical legal partnership model. And for those of you who are unfamiliar with the medical legal partnership model, essentially the way that it works is you have a lawyer who is embedded at in a healthcare setting, be it a hospital or a community clinic. And the lawyer receives referrals from the medical providers, social workers, behavioral health support specialists to address legal needs that can have a positive impact on social determinants of health. And kind of related to this panel too, what I've been able to see in my role in teaching the medical legal partnership clinic is that lawyers don't work in a vacuum the same way that medical professionals don't work in a vacuum, or our elected leaders don't work in a vacuum. All of our work is interconnected, and it's really important that we all recognize our own piece in the puzzle in order to positively impact our clients' lives. So in the context of today's symposium, for individuals who've recently arrived from the border, a big part of making sure that people are able to access all of the services that they need in order to survive and then eventually thrive and become integrated and part of our community here in Minnesota and around the country is really helping them to gain legal status. And that's really the critical role that immigration lawyers play within all of the unmet needs that people have when they first arrive in the United States. So our medical partner that we have at the clinic I teach at Mitchell Hamlin is United Family Medicine, which is a federally qualified health center in the West 7th neighborhood of St. Paul. And through that clinic, we actually have a fair number of immigration cases that I've taken on, both because I came into the role as an immigration attorney, and then also the patient population of the clinic is about 30 or 40% foreign born. So we see all sorts of people from both Latino immigrants. So we've assisted people with everything ranging from DACA and TPS renewal to asylum claims and even family-based applications and applications for citizenship, where we require an N648 disability waiver. And through that role and kind of assisting people either gain status or become citizens so that they can access SSI benefits or other benefits that allow them to access care, it's a really critical part in making sure that people's needs are met. Thanks.
Thank you, Anna. Dr. Haitham, please.
Hello and good afternoon, everyone. So my name is Haitham Hussein. My first name is hard to pronounce, but if you think of your thumb, high thumb is a kind of a close approximation. It's a sad story. I'm Egyptian, and Egyptians are lazy, so we do not stick our tongues out when we're supposed to. So actually at home, everybody calls me Haitham. So don't have to worry about all of that. But I was trained in Egypt. I'm a physician. I'm a neurologist. I went to medical school in Ain Shams University in Cairo, and I did my first residency there too. It was a combined neurology and psychiatry. Believe it or not, I was convinced I was going to be a psychiatrist. But after the first year, spending 6 months in neurology and 6 months in psychiatry, it was clear that I cannot be a psychiatrist. And I also love neurology because of stroke. And so now I'm a stroke neurologist. I came to the United States in 2005. I was a researcher for a few years, and then I had to repeat another residency to be able to practice. I did my residency here at the University of Minnesota, and then a fellowship in stroke. And so after that, I practiced in Texas for a few years, and then I came back here. So I am an immigrant, but I consider myself one of the privileged immigrants. I did not experience trauma, war, or crossing the borders and all these very painful experiences. I've had some inconveniences along the way. I couldn't go back home for 9 years because I was always worried that they're not going to give me a visa and to come back to my training in time. I was, so I still consider these minor issues, of course, compared to all the trauma that we're talking about today. My last name is Hussein, so a lot of people would ask me if I'm related to the tyrant Saddam Hussein. So I came here right after 9/11 and all of that, all minor. But of course, I gravitated to issues of social justice and healthcare disparity because of my background as an Arab and an immigrant, and because of what I saw in my training and in my practice. Half my training was at HCMC, Hennepin County Medical Center. So we've provide, care for the uninsured, the marginalized, the undocumented, all these people. When I practiced also, I was in community hospitals and safety net hospitals. So of course, I have seen a lot of struggles from that. And I learned important lessons. The first lesson I learned is that even though I am an immigrant, I actually don't know what other immigrants go through, and that I need to educate myself and have to listen. And I hope that I'm doing the right thing. And it's important for me to make sure that you all know that I'm not here to teach anyone or give lectures. I'm just here to share my experience, and I'm still a privileged immigrant here in America. But I have done a lot of research and community outreach in issues that are related to healthcare disparity, and my studies and my community outreach projects really taught me how much I don't know, and how much is still needed, efforts needed to learn more. For example, I learned that there is no equivalent word for stroke in the Hmong language. So I'm a stroke neurologist, and we give stroke education for every stroke patient, including Hmong patients. And for many years, I didn't know that there is not an equivalent word for stroke in Hmong. And how can you engage in a conversation when we don't even have the same concepts or the same? So a lot of work is needed. Hmong have the stroke 11 years younger than white people. So I am really honored to be here to participate in this wonderful panel, and I appreciate all the effort that Dr. Fuel and my colleagues who organized the event put into this. And I'm looking forward to sharing more with everyone and learning more from everyone.
Thank you so much. Amelia. Oh,
There.
there we go.
Oh, sorry about that. Buenas tardes, folks. My name is Emilia Gonzalez Avalos, and I'm having a grow fun moment because your life is what I wanted to be when I was growing up. I wanted to be a doctor. I was a child that was born in Mexico City in a working class neighborhoods in one of the poorest municipalities of Mexico City. So like a lot of sweatshops and construction workers. I am the proud daughter and granddaughter and sister of construction workers. My brother has he has a degree. He's a civil engineer, but my dad says you're a construction worker with a degree and with privilege. You're still a construction worker. So that is, I have benefited from the work of people's the people can do with their hands. My grandfather built our home. My father built me a future. And because my father remains undocumented, I am clear and determined that any and all the privilege that I can acquire in my lifetime have to be, and I am honored to dedicate them to work alongside with low-wage workers, which are now recognized, something that we have always known. Our workers are essential. They are essential family members, essential neighbors, essential loved ones. So I, like I said, I was born in Mexico City and I migrated to Minnesota between 1992 and 2001. And I say this range because I spent my teenagers going back and forth because my parents could not decide which parent I had to stay with. And I grew up basically spending my time with only one parent at a time because there wasn't enough money to support all of us. So finally in 2001, when the Twin Towers where we had a terrorist attack in the Twin Towers, my father said, well, I don't think you can do this anymore. You're gonna have to make a decision because you know this moment is going to be really hard for all of us. This is gonna be an opportunity to keep otherizing people and weaponizing racism for the benefit of the few. And my father is a guy that did not finish high school and he has so much knowledge and he's the reason why I'm here. I became a community organizer. I was an activist and I held my banner, I mobilized people, but I truly became a community organizer when my daughter was born in 2009. I was breastfeeding my daughter and I was watching back then what we know as Al Jazeera News. And I was watching women talking about the Arab Spring and how they could not find their sons and their teenage daughters or like college student kids and children because they were out in the streets doing the work of the people. And I was holding this baby and, you know, I was a little traumatized because I was undocumented. I had this baby and there was this possibility that I might not be able to raise my daughter just like my dad and my parents had a split time to raise me. And I'm hearing the clarity of these women as they were saying that if they were recognizing on live news, that if they would have taken the role of owning responsibility, of improving the conditions under a dictatorship, their children would have not disappeared.
Yes.
And that struck me as I was having this little baby in my hands and I was nursing and it was like 3 a.m. and I was like, oh, you know, hormonal. And it was just a big moment for me. And I committed. If the state wants to deport me, like Stokely Carmichael will say, that's their problem. But if the state has the power to deport me, then that's my problem. And I had a problem. And I dedicated my time to learn and acquire knowledge to make sure that I was not going to be deported without a fight, and also work with others to accomplish that. That was the moment that I became more involved in what was Navigate Minnesota, which was a network of undocumented students that we used to meet and get together to get access to higher education. We all wanted to go to college and fulfill our parents' dreams. And then we joined campaigns and we worked with others and we had trainings. And eventually we all realized together that papers are not power. And that power and having decisions from that place of power really determines who lives and who dies. And then we had a problem of power. As we see around and across our communities, and especially the exacerbated racial disparities after and through COVID, we know that yes, we are dying of divestment, of socioeconomic determinants, of health inequities. But in community organizing, we call that dying of powerlessness. We don't have enough power to change the conditions. We need to build more power to change the conditions. But these problems are so deep in the roots of white supremacy and deception on this country that we are not the only ones that are impacted by it. It is insulting that a person has to die because they can't access insulin. It is insulting that a person can think about suicide because they don't have home or shelter in one of the wealthiest nations of the world. So we have a problem, and we, working together, can build power to accomplish a solution. So that's what I dedicate my time, just thinking about power, thinking about who to build power with, getting like super clear and deep on how trauma shows up in our community organizing strategies. And I am here because my colleague Jessica Velasco could not make it, and I will try my best to fill her very big shoes, because she's a powerhouse that has built amazing campaigns that have changed people's lives in Southern Minnesota, and my colleague Maria Elena in Central Minnesota. And I am very grateful to have and work with a team of around 17 people that think every day about organizing for power and organizing for change.
Thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for letting people into who you are and what you do and what drives you. So we're going to try and get through as many questions as we can today. And so I packed multiple questions in each question, and we'll see how far we go. The first question I have is, when people have just come to the United States and are newly arrived in our communities, what do you see as step one for each of us to ensure that they feel welcome and have access to the resources they need to establish healthy lives here? And I'll invite anybody to begin, to stir it up a little bit.
Well, ideally, from a medical standpoint, there should be a process of doing some medical screening that includes physical assessment and psychiatric evaluation for trauma. We're talking about, people crossing the border, evaluation for the hearing, vision, dental evaluations, and all of that. Unfortunately, these resources aren't as accessible as available for people who cross the borders and don't have legal status, as Anna was saying. There are some clinics that can provide some low cost care, but usually undocumented people have, of course, financial difficulties and have also fear of being exposed, so they're not very willing to go and sign up for insurance, even if they can afford it or things like that. And it is definitely a gap. One of the things that we're trying to do to address this is a project that I am doing with one of my colleagues at the university, Dr. Jonathan Kirsch. Dr. Kirsch is the director of the mobile health clinic. So it's like a bus, and
Yep.
I think he
Earlier.
participated
Yes.
earlier. So this is one of the few medical options that we go to neighborhoods and we just do health screening, and we don't necessarily have to take anyone's name or contact information or anything. The difficulty we have is what happens after that initial assessment. We don't have as good of a follow-up, and one of the projects that we're working on is improving the subsequent care after the mobile clinic visit. But definitely an issue that we need to work on, how to provide more medical care, preventative care to newcomers, regardless of their legal status.
Thank you. Adriana, would you like to go next?
Yeah, I can go next. So I have to first of all admit that for Minneapolis Public Schools, this is something that it has not been a reality. We have learned a lot with our newly arrival Afghan refugees. So what the district has done in supporting our new Afghan families and other new families to the country, we do have a partnership with the Minneapolis Immigrant Office. You know, that's really good to have the collaboration with other entities so that we can provide the support to our families. And also with the Immigrant Law Center. And currently, the district just hired a new Afghan cultural facilitator this year. So the district is taking those baby steps so that we can provide that support to our newly arrived families here in the district. So it's something that is little by little, but surely growing.
Thanks so much, Adriana. I think they make such a difference to be welcomed by people who share your same culture, and that has been brought up in other panels. Anna, would you like to share your thoughts on this question?
Sure. So kind of like thinking with my lawyer hat on, I think the other thing to recognize is that, as Dr. Hyden mentioned, people come to the country as immigrants in all sorts of different ways. Like people come through an employment-based petition, they come through a family petition, or as has been discussed at many of the other panels today, people come to our southern border seeking protection as asylum seekers. And I would say that my kind of like going back to the first panel of the day, I think Siren said this, but what I would, in a perfect world, what I would like to see is a system where we welcome people with dignity and a system where everybody gets a fair shake. Because fundamentally, my issue with asylum processing in the United States, and frankly, in many parts of Western Europe or other parts of the world, is that people don't really get a fair shake. We don't always process claims and give people a fair proceeding in compliance with our obligations under the 1951 Refugee Convention and the 67 Protocol. And in my personal opinion on it is, as a country, we signed the 67 Protocol, and we have obligations to protect people that are fleeing persecution and have them go through a process where they're able to present their claim for asylum and present evidence and have a fair trial. And that's kind of what I would like to see. On an individual level, I suppose just increased access to legal services and attorneys so that people have the chance to meet with a lawyer and find out what their immigration options are. Unfortunately, our immigration laws are very, very rigid. So if you don't follow each step exactly as you should, and there are many roadblocks in our immigration system where you can sort of have your process derailed at any point in time, or if you run afoul of the law, that sort of thing, it can be very devastating to your case. So I think it's really important to like have access to those resources to help you navigate the process so that you at least have as close to a fair shake as possible in trying to gain lawful status in the country, because that really opens up the door for a lot of other things.
Thanks so much for sharing that. And access to counsel, really just thinking about that briefly, that it doesn't matter if you are 4 years old, 40 years old, or 90 years old, you enter into the United States without documentation and you're placed into removal proceedings, you don't automatically have a right to an attorney. So you have the right to obtain an attorney, but there is no government provision of counsel. So Emilia, what would your answer be to this question? What is step one?
So for us in a community organizing in a power building organization perspective, we see needs in a reframing of rights. People have the right to basic needs or to satisfy their basic necessities. People have the right to a shelter. People have the right to clothing. People have the right to safe food and clean water. That when you are building relationships and organizing a campaign, change our contextual mindset, because we're not begging for something that is isolated or that we don't think we deserve. Our job as organizers is to ensure that people get clear that we are worthy of this, that this is a birthright. And it does not matter our who we love, who we pray to, our gender, or our immigration status. We are not entering a country just making a single individual decision. Most of the working class in quote unquote on regular migration is forced migration. And getting clear on that lifts a big weight of people's shoulders and begins the reclaiming of our shared humanity. Shared humanity is critical to start building relatedness. Relatedness to belong. And when you belong in a community, you can find and maneuver ways to thrive, to build relationships, to ask for what you need. So our organizing trait is, people think, oh, they just, fill up meetings and door knock. We spend actually a lot of time getting to know people in deep levels, getting to hear people's fears, but most importantly, getting to hear people's dreams, their desires. What did they want to do? Like, what did they dream when they were 5, 6, 7 years old? Why can't we have that kind of world? Why can't we have the kind of community that has everything that folks need to thrive? What are we missing when we don't have that? That is sort of a vaccination now in the medical field. It's not a vaccination, but we can think of it as a vaccination to the otherizing and exclusion that we know is very deliberate. It is designed and is used to build and protect power for a wealthy few. So that is in a cultural perspective. In this structural perspective is removing barriers, right? Like removing barriers and training people. We have so many experiences of all kinds of system navigation when people show up at the door, and if folks don't have documentation or they have a thick accent like mine, they're not received in the most welcoming experience. That the training and the first person who is at the door is critical. I think that I agree there is a high need of having people that look like us at the doors in the services. But it's really important for those folks that are providing those services that understand that it is not just a job and you get a paycheck. You are accountable to a community that is in high and critical need and that is creating that workforce opportunity for you to thrive. And that builds a sense of responsibility that meets people at the door with the highest expectations and excellence of service. That is so fundamental to have in our cultural embedded in our structures and how we deliver services, because that humanizes people and it goes a long way. Mistreatment, discrimination, oftentimes we have the right rules and policies, we have the right protocols, but the people who enforce those protocols use it so often in discretion. And that discretion comes with bias, that discretion comes with our scripts. How are we promoting that growth in our institutions so that we can eradicate those scripts and become welcoming institutions? Thus the barrier removal is an aspect, but also the creation from the ground. What is to actually build institutions from the ground up that serve the excluded, the undocumented, the LGBTQ community, the Muslim, the disabled community. Building for and by is just as critical as removing barriers.
Thank you, Amelia. So I think my voice is a little faint, so hopefully you can hear me now. In thinking about, the next question is, in thinking about social determinants of health, can you address the health consequences of irregular migration or challenges unique to immigrant and refugee populations, including the impact of trauma and why and how we as service providers, regardless of our area of work, can be attuned to and address these issues, some of which may not be immediately visible. And I know that's a super duper long question, but I wrote it down and I think you all have it. So who would like to address this one first?
Well, I can tell you that when I was in training in the Stone Age, it was a long time ago, I did not learn about social determinants of health. That was not part of the curriculum in the medical school or the residency program. So this is something that I learned when I was in practice. And so for those who are like me, don't know, the CDC have 5 social determinants of health: healthcare access and quality, economic stability, education access and quality, neighborhood and built environment, which includes access to healthy food choices, and social and community context. So these were found to be independently impacting people's health. So someone's education or financial state is a direct predictor of that person having a stroke or heart attack or dementia, regardless whether that person has diabetes or high blood pressure, or just being poor or having certain, unfavorable any of these social determinants of health. And so that's a very important concept. In looking at the state of Minnesota, I was checking Carver County. The life expectancy in Carver County is 81 years, and in Mahnomen County is 73 years. So 4.5 hours drive equals 8 extra years of life. Looking at the zip codes in the Twin Cities, East Rondo, the life expectancy is 65, and across the street, other side in Summit Hill, 86 years. So 5-minute drive is 21 extra years of life. Guess who lives in East Rondo? 50% African American, Latino, Hmong, 3/4 people of color, racial minorities, only 10% with the college education. So that's just to give you an overview about social determinants of health. Now, in my experience, of course, I have seen many, many examples of how that impacted people's health. I remember a Hispanic man who kept getting admitted to the hospital with diabetes complications. And the treating team and us and the nurses were thinking, oh, he's just not compliant, he's not taking his medication and so forth. And then the charge nurse went to talk to him to just try to advise him to have to take your medicine. And he told her that, yes, he understands. He doesn't have money to get his insulin. He prioritizes food for the family. There you go. So of course, you know, we all had a lot of guilt and shame. And again, you have to ask, and you don't know, you never assume. Another question, another example, you know, I am a stroke specialist, so there are treatments for stroke, but they are very time sensitive. There's a time window that we can give medications to reverse the effects of stroke. So we want people to come to the hospital quickly. And the best way, of course, to call 911. And we learned that some members of, you know, racial minority groups don't like calling 911. They don't like to see anyone with a uniform at the door. And some people don't care if it's a paramedic or it's a police officer. They just don't want to. So then we end up having our stroke patients from racial minorities come later to the hospital, and we are unable to use the treatments that we can provide because they've already kind of missed the time window. So, of course, many examples that I remember over the years. So to answer your question, what should we as professionals do when we encounter such patients? I would say the first step is not to make assumptions and to listen, and a lot more than speaking, and try to build trust. That's for the healthcare professionals. That would be my suggestion.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it. Would you like to comment?
Sure. I think going off what the doctor said about the socioeconomic determinants of health. So my background is in theology and public health. I know, interesting conversation, but that means that I can tell you about redemption and talk about system change in the same sermon. But what I want to say about that is that if we put all the socioeconomic determinants of health and we think deeply about what does that mean in a civic engagement perspective, that really translates to a full democracy. If we have solutions for the socioeconomic determinants of health, then that means we're working towards a multiracial democracy that works for everybody, no exceptions. So I want us to get clear on that understanding. When we put and implement practices of democracy in a meatpacking working plant, or through a worker center, or through a network of daycare providers, that nourishes the soil that we need to build the fabric for the healthy democracy. It is getting us ready for that moment. It is building that muscle to sustain culturally and structurally the changes that we need. I also think of service providers. This is my community organizing hat, and I'm very loyal to it. I think, well, I'll tell you this joke in another time, but anyways, community organizing hat, service providers. You guys do a lot through your day-to-day to support people with immediate needs, with the service deliverance that allows people to be seen, heard, validated, and have basic necessities fulfilled. We value that, we understand that, but system change needs a little bit more. Actually requires more, requires a little bit of your private life to be able to get involved, to be able to build power for that system change. The conditions that we need to transform are not, they're not through our boarding rooms and our closed door meetings. They happen in the bread and butter of our democracy. And it has to happen. I know that as we are going into some new version of the normal, we have changed dramatically as people, and we have changed dramatically as a community. And as we mourn that and we give a space for that, let us also reimagine what is to exist in this new togetherness for the greater good. And that is hard work, very hard work. But what's at stake is what's ahead. I often tell, I work in a multi-generational organization. So my early 20s, Minneapolis-based organizers relate to our mid-50s Greater Minnesota organizers. And we have conversations about the landscape of our civic community. And some have fantasies about post-capitalism. And the reality is that we are facing more authoritarian global governments in the world. And we have to pay attention to what that actually means to our life and to our socioeconomic determinants of health. When Chile was in dictatorship, their health outcomes were terrible. Like this, we know this anecdotally and historically, but if you go into the public health implications, the amount of shock doctrine, the reduction of service, the reduction of our beloved community institutionality is diminished and diluted economically. That has health implications, that has life implications. So that's what we have ahead. We really have to be fighting for our democracy if we're really serious about socioeconomic determinants of health. And I will finalize by saying that I will repeat, I think I said that when I introduced myself, we are dying of powerlessness. Our folks, our essential workers died of powerlessness. We had a precedent that protected the product and not the workers at the beginning of the pandemic. We had people with institutional power that cared more about the BMIs than the lives of people that have sustained us at the bottom of our economic and our economic supply chain. And we need to do something to change that. Our community is debilitated right now. We are recuperating and there's potential, but we have to be very clear about the interventions. We cannot be meek about the interventions. So Mayor Carter and Mayor Fry are talking about these big investments, $6 billion. It cannot be business as usual. We all need to be paying attention to where those investments are going, how we're going to hold those results accountable. Are we being courageous about those investments? Or are we doing the same thing that we did in economic development that already didn't work? So that's the invitation, to pay attention to how those monies are being spent, because that money is your taxpayer money. This is the money that you're putting in the pocket for our shared well-being, and we have to be vigilant about it too.
Thank you so much, Amelia. I appreciate it. And Anna, could I turn to you with the same question regarding how in our areas of work can we be attuned to and address these issues, and specifically in the context of the medical legal partnership, if you want to touch on that briefly.
Sure. So, so as Dr. Hytham and Amelia were speaking, I kind of was jotting down some notes about things that were sort of buzzing in my head as they were speaking. And so I guess just kind of like big picture with thinking about immigrant populations generally, I think when we kind of like think about social determinants of health and how it affects your outcomes with trauma specifically, as was mentioned in some of the earlier panels, the ways that we hold trauma in our bodies, how trauma creates chronic stressors in our bodies that have negative impacts on other areas of our health. I think with respect to immigrant populations, we have to acknowledge how poverty, like living in poverty, is a chronic long-term form of trauma and a long-term stressor that has a negative impact on your health. The same thing for undocumented populations or populations that have DACA or TPS, or people who are waiting years and years for their final hearing before immigration court. That uncertainty and sort of like living with the knowledge that at any point in time, things can come crashing down and you'll lose the rights or your life here in the United States. That is a form of trauma that's effectively being inflicted on people by our own government in many respects. So I think just like acknowledging that these are stressors that our clients or people that we work with, people in our community, like our neighbors, they experience, that's something that's part of their life day to day. And then with populations that have recently arrived, when you're providing services to them, be you a lawyer, a therapist, a doctor, you need to understand the trauma that people have gone through both in their home countries that caused them to flee and come and seek protection in the United States, as well as the trauma of the journey. And part of that trauma, I think, too, that we need to understand is not just like the journey from their home country to our border, but also some of the things that may have happened to them when they were apprehended by CBP. So if they had to spend time in a helera or in immigration detention, that's like another thing that is a very traumatic experience for people who we later go on to represent when they're applying for asylum. And when we represent people as lawyers, when people are applying for asylum, one thing that I have kind of like struggled with a little bit more recently is the fact that part of the asylum process really requires us to force our clients to relive some of the worst things that have ever happened to them over and over again to make sure that their story is consistent and that they're able to tell it in a way that satisfies the immigration judge or the asylum officer. And going back to trauma, it also impacts the way that people communicate. If someone has gone through a traumatic experience, they may not be able to tell the story in a linear format. They may have inappropriate reactions, like they'll laugh when they're talking about something very horrible that's happened to them. So understanding all of those things when you work with someone who's a survivor of trauma is really, really important. And then the last thing that I just want to mention too is, and I think this is something definitely that the immigration bar is, I think we haven't really, we've just kind of like stuffed it down and moved on, which is very unhealthy. But just recognizing secondary trauma that we go through as helpers and people who have to hear about really horrible things that our clients have been through. And then also just recognizing direct trauma that we went through as lawyers during the Trump administration and the really volatile and hostile environment that we had to work in during those years, and also like kind of having in the back of our minds that the crisis is not, the crisis is still, it's sort of at bay right now, but it could be coming back again. But I think just kind of like being mindful of that and taking care of ourselves, because as they say on airplanes, you have to put on your own mask before you can help the person next to you.
Mm-hmm. Thanks so much, Ana. Adriana, would you like to address this one too?
It's a little hard for me to talk about this. As I was listening to everyone, just personally for me, myself, my mother self-deported 4 years ago, and she passed away a year and a half ago. And she died alone. So when we talk about trauma, I think that we need to, first of all, acknowledge colonialism and how much pain it has been inflicted, especially by the United States. So what I do with my own trauma, right, in raising my 2 nephews and being an elected official is ensuring that Minneapolis Public Schools provides the mental support for our children. So I can say that even though the district has done not a very good job, we have been pushing and advocating for to have therapists in all of our schools. So every single school in Minneapolis has at least one therapist. And the advocacy that we brought forward, it was to ensure that not only we provided therapy, but also to contract with agencies that provided bilingual and bicultural therapists. So it's like wearing all the different hats and dealing with my own trauma is to ensure that I do exercise the power given to me to keep advocating for our children.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you very much. I'm going to try and meld the last two questions here into one, because I want to make sure that there's time for audience members who have questions to ask their questions too. So the last question is, can you please speak to the importance of delivering services in a culturally informed manner and eradicating racial bias and practical steps that you would suggest in working in a collaborative way to improve healthcare outcomes? Are there examples that immediately come to mind? And then the last question, what do you want to leave people with today? What do you want them leaving here ready to do? So I'll leave you the time that you can take, and maybe we'll try and have a couple of minutes left for people to ask their own questions or share their comments too before we wrap for today.
I think one of the, this is not necessarily culturally informed. It looks different for different cultures, but there is, we are all aware of the stigmatization side of the dehumanizing spectrum. So I think of it like as a line. On one side, we have this very pervasive and by design deployment of anti-immigrant rhetoric and othering, right? Like the criminality and bestiality of people and, you know, all that. I don't need to name or say more examples. We're all very familiar with that. But there is another spectrum that we're not very familiar with that is also important. And that is the infantilization of our communities. Pobrecito, feeling pity, feeling sorry. Feeling sorry is not registered as feeling compassion. Being compassionate allows us to be seen as full human beings with agency and self-determination. I think it is important for us and in our communities to understand that regardless of how much structural oppression we face, we still have some choices. And those choices are lifelines. Of course, reform and movement building and changing systems allows us to have more choices. And those choices are enhanced by privilege and all the other contextual things. But these two types of dehumanization matter. It is important that we understand that in our practice. These are folks that are contemporary heroes. And let's not glorify the pain and the essentiality of their labor, but have taken great risks with very little and have been historically visionaries. So there is light, there is potential there. And that is where we tap, not on the, I'm so sorry, because that, like, you guys, I say this with my heart. That is your white privilege and your white gaze trying to be comforted. And your comfort cannot be at the center of the interventions. The well-being of the client, the well-being of the folks that live in the margins of structural oppression are at the center of that conversation, and we have to be mindful of that. I think that that is like a bias, I will say, that we can build capacity and learn and unlearn together. I also had, bad frameworks and bad scripts in my head that I've been working really hard to strip. And if I can do it, I think all of us can do it. And my call to action, I get involved, participate, build power, show up, protect our democracy, take risks. How do we build, like the thing, I want to say something about the cultural aspect of Minnesota. Minnesota nice is very nice, like in our surface, but a lot of the things that we don't want to wrestle with happen behind closed doors or behind people's backs or like in emails that says per my request and per my whatever. And that is behavior that eventually becomes not nice and actually harmful. We need to be able to grow the muscle and the maturity to have courageous conversations in this time and age. These contemporary challenges are unprecedented. They don't happen in a vacuum. We are facing these threats and climate change and democracy threats. You might think that this is about the poor refugee that is just arriving to St. Cloud, but your self-interest is making sure that those systems meet the needs of this refugee, because it means we're building the culture and the structure of the nation that we have dreamed about. So that is the invitation, seeing people fully with the potential. And that changes just the dynamic of how we deploy services at any level.
As a physician, I always try to build alliance with my patients and their families, and the plan for treatment has to be, everyone on the same page. So it is really hard for me and other providers to do that if we do not understand our patients and their cultural background. For example, the story that I told before about Hmong people not having equivalent word for stroke. So we had to change our stroke educational material. And so with consultation with the Hmong community, we did cross-cultural adaptation of some of the American Heart Association stroke education material. And the way we did it is that we took the original English versions and we changed the English into a new version that is more culturally appropriate for the Hmong culture. And then that is what we translated into Hmong. So instead of putting a word like oxygen, for example, put the air you breathe, because that's more relevant to the community. So it's really very important to understand the background. Another example I have in my mind is from the Somali community. I'm always seen as the savior whenever I walk into the room of a Somali patient, because my last name is Hussein and I am a Muslim, and I say Salaam Alaikum when I first walk in. And so they feel that they are related to me, that they, oh, finally we have someone. So and then they start telling me the story. And because of that, common cultural background, I find myself much more able to help Somali patients and their families navigate the health system, understand concepts. Sometimes they have a certain interpretation of Islam that I can, because I'm a Muslim, say, no, but you remember this verse said that, and so we can have this conversation without feeling, embarrassed, and then we can reach to a positive outcome. What I would like to see is that other people in the health care field start by acknowledging that we don't know if we don't put the effort and try to understand the experience of those unfortunate individuals who come here in all these traumatizing manners. And I also really want us to focus on collaboration between individuals, collaboration between organizations. For example, that work that we're doing with the mobile health clinic, we have the American Heart Association participating with education material. We have the student interest group in neurology from the University of Minnesota participating in making follow-ups. So always when we combine forces, we can achieve more. And then I would say the other thing that I want everyone to do is to vote, and vote the right way. The correct way, not the one on right to be interpreted differently. Vote the correct way. Vote the correct way. Yes, And then I really want to see more clinics like what Anna works at, where we don't work in silos anymore. The medical professionals, the legal, the social, and how we can incorporate more collaboration, because like we don't work in vacuum, like you were saying. So the legal status has important impact on health and vice versa. And I want us to ask our organizations to really walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So it isn't enough to have it in the plan to do this or do that. There has to be investment. There has to be allocation of resources, of funds. If we want to educate young kids to become neurologists and nurses with neurology, that we have to put the effort into that. That's, I think, enough for me, and thank you very much for the time.
All right, so just very quickly, and again, I was jotting down notes as others were speaking. So to Amelia's point or observation about Minnesota Nice, I will share just very quickly. I grew up in Minnesota, so I grew up in Melrose, Minnesota, which is near St. Cloud, about 100 miles northwest of the Twin Cities. But I went to law school and then practiced in New York City. So I lived there for 9 years, and then I moved back to Minnesota. And even though I'm from here, I definitely experienced reverse culture shock when I moved back to Minnesota, because on the East Coast and in New York, people are very direct and just kind of like say their piece and then everybody moves on with their life. But in Minnesota, it's not really like that. We kind of like say things in a very passive aggressive way, and then it's not I prefer the East Coast in many respects. Anyway, so I think like with respect to culturally sensitive practices, I think like the big thing for all professionals, or like anybody who works with people who are different from you, is to come from a place of humility. Understanding that just because like I grew up in the United States in a Western culture, just because that's the culture I grew up in, it doesn't make it any better or worse than other cultures. Other cultures are different. And I think you need to have humility and willingness, openness to learn and understand where other people are coming from. Another thing too, that is like a really big value for me more and more as a lawyer is the practice of client-centered lawyering. And for those who haven't heard of this before, it's a concept that you center the services you provide on the client, and your job as a lawyer really is, and I also teach professional responsibility or legal ethics at Mitchell, and the whole philosophy of client-centered lawyering is that your job as a lawyer is to allow your client to make an informed decision. So you provide them with advice, but you're not the one calling the shots. You present them with information and then let them make the choice about the direction that their case is going to go, and then also where their life is going to go. And I think like that is a really important thing to always keep in mind when you're working with someone. You shouldn't just be like, oh, as Amelia said, like, oh, pobrecito. And I've had instances where I've been working with someone and they're like, doctora, no sé qué hacer, dígame qué hacer. And, or like, I don't know what to do, tell me what to do. And be like, sorry, I can't tell you what to do. It's your life. I can just kind of give you the options and give you my opinion on the strengths and weaknesses of each option. But at the end of the day, it's your choice. And then I guess like the two things to leave you with. So with respect to like interdisciplinary practice, that the model that I work with, I think like something to sort of keep in mind as far as like call to action or like what you can do. I would really encourage people to tap into existing networks, existing organizations, rather than trying to reinvent the wheel. And then also think about what are your strengths or talents or skills and how can you use the skills that you already have to help existing networks. So like for me, just to give an example, I'm a lawyer. I don't have any medical training. I last took a science class, I think my freshman year of college. So would be really dumb for me to like learn how to give vaccines or like provide medical care. That's not the best use of my time or talents. I should be working in my capacity as a lawyer, and as should other people as well, depending on like what skills you bring to the table. And then kind of like the last thing, which is more like a 10-year or 20-year plan, because I'm a legal educator, I think we really need to think about building the bench. And as far as culturally responsive services, really the best thing is to recruit people from the communities to be in these positions. So we need to, and it can't just start when they're adults, it has to start when they're younger, to go to the schools and show people that it is possible for you to go to college and go to law school or go to medical school, so that in 10 or 20 years from now, the legal profession, the medical profession, all sorts of other disciplines reflect the communities that they serve. Thanks.
Thank you.
Be a good troublemaker for the system. Make a difference. Run for office. And if you're not interested in being an elected official, everything is political, even when we flush the toilet, right? Everything is controlled by the government. It is what it is. And as Anna mentioned, contribute of your time, your treasure, or your talent. We are in the brink of losing Congress this year. We are in the brink of losing the state of Minnesota as well. Be aware what is coming our way, because if we are not, the fight is outside of the cities. If we are not aware and doing everything that we can, contributing to organizations, partnering up with people, building coalitions, I'm really fearful. I'm really fearful. So not only vote, but also shut the system down to build a new one. Gracias.
Thank you. Thank you so much to our amazing panel for the time that you've taken and what you've shared with us all today. I know we're over time, but just want to make sure that if people have questions before we wrap for the day, you can ask your question. Yes, go ahead. You have your hand raised. Yes. Oh, someone might be bringing you a microphone. Thank you.
So when migration status and fabricated otherness have been systematically linked with powerlessness, how can we support people and communities to be more involved in spaces of power which might be hostile or difficult to access for them?
So how can we help individuals who might be powerless in navigating spaces that might be inaccessible to them?
That is the thing is that power is available everywhere. If you get 2 or 3 people and get together and think how they can improve or build the influence to change their conditions, that's your power building strategy. So having folks, in conversation, but also building deep relationships. A lot of the relational organizing relies on understanding that what happens to you happens to me. And if we have that shared vision of humanity, then we know what it is to fight for the people we don't know. That itself allows us to heal from cynicism and mistrust, because we can, deconstruct and say all the things that we don't like about systems and institutions. But we believe we have a responsibility to move in disciplined hope. And that's a disciplined hope. There's a quote, I don't know who said it, but it's popular. That disciplined hope that is the axe that breaks down doors in times of emergency. That is the disciplined hope that allows you to think about what's at stake and makes the present inhabitable. That is a disciplined hope, and that is a practice. as we have attorneys and practitioners here that dedicate a lot of time in schooling and building capacity, that requires discipline. So that's a skill that you all have. So now integrate the discipline hope in your practice and invite others to do that. Oh, how can we so be condescending? How can we tell a refugee that is struggling with housing to have hope? That is where power building comes. If we don't believe that we are the solution to change our system, nobody's gonna do it for us. Nobody's gonna save us. This is it. We have to believe in us, and I believe in us. That's my discipline hope. I'm fully in. So jump in and jump with others.
Awesome. Anna, looks like you have an answer there too.
Yeah, so this isn't necessarily directly in response to the question, but this is more for those of us in the room who maybe have more privilege and power, is being willing to share. And so like as a lawyer, and I'm a lawyer who is, Amelia and I work together, and I consider myself a movement lawyer, community lawyer. And I think a big part of that a lot of times is learning how to be best actress in a supporting role. And the whole concept of like, we're a voice for the voiceless. No, that's ridiculous. Like, they have a voice. It's more, if someone is voiceless and you have the microphone, hand them the mic and let them speak for themselves and give them some of the power that you have.
Thank you. Thank you. Other questions that people have for today? Yes, for here. Oh, microphone's coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Oftentimes the system pins communities of color against each other. What are some ways that you can help us to kind of combat that? Because it's the system, right? And I see that happening across communities, in government, and in a lot of spaces. So I just love you. Thank you so much. Like, I can relate to you and I can hear it. Like, I can listen to you all day. So I was just wondering, give us your thoughts on that. Thank you.
Yep. So just to restate the question, how to combat the system, specifically the ways in which a system ends up resulting in communities of color being divided against each other.
I think one perk of being accountable to our base is like you have to be mindful. If your client or your base, if you're an organizer or mobilizer, if folks don't hold you in tension, you're not doing it right. How folks have to be super safe that they can tell you, you're not doing this well. And I've been told I'm not doing this well many, many times. That is not an offense, it is a gift, because they hold me to a high regard of accountability with them. That is governance, that is knowledge, that is mutuality, that is reciprocity. So I think you're right, we live in a world where we are continuously told that there's not enough and that we have to fight for breadcrumbs. It's either, these are Americans or immigrants, or this new upcoming theory, the replacement theory. We are somehow trying to replace somebody, and people really tapping into that. That is the antidote that I see, is to really have the hard conversations. Minnesota is not the best place, I guess, culturally to have those hard conversations, and we have to, break our teeth and get there. In particular, in the Twin Cities area, we had really tough conversations in terms of safety and security. Like, a lot of people understand that that the public assassination of George Floyd pivoted a critical moment of planning and designing what safety looks like in the Twin Cities. That conversation was very contentious, and it has not been solved. because we're pitted against each other. It's either our safety or incarcerating the house people. You know, like we have to be able to hold us accountable for the frames and the ignorances that we had inherited from colonialism and capitalism and racism. In particular, in the Latino community, we have to solve our anti-Blackness. We have to solve our Muslim and Islamophobia. We have to solve our norms on LGBTQ inclusion. And most importantly, classism between our own. That we eat like honey, this fallacy of merit-based. Who deserves citizenship? Who deserves a scholarship? Who deserves a fellowship? And the truth is that we are all worthy of having opportunities. And while we have to play in this system the way it is, we can still have conversations and deconstruct what's wrong with it. So I hope that as we are trying to join each other in community, we can have those public conversations. We are hungry to talk about safety between Black and brown folks. We are hungry to talk about human trafficking in the spectrum of women of color. We are hungry to talk about sexual assault in all parts of our state. So I think it's predominantly dialogue. We don't know each other. That's why we don't relate to each other. We just need to know each other.
Thanks so much, Amelia. And this is an opportunity for us all to get to know each other today. Dr. Fuel, you had a follow-up.
I want to say something. I think that for me, being here today, it's given me the opportunity to see an immense amount of resources and immense amounts of potential. And one thing seems to me obvious at the end of the day is that we need to talk more. That this is a good beginning, and there's a lot of individuals and organizations here who have potential to make a change. So what I want to throw out is the possibility that we create some sort of a place where we don't intend to do it alone. We're all doing many pieces. We're all doing things in many different areas. Why don't we think about the possibility of joining resources and creating a body that would encompass, as we defined it, the interests of all of us in a unitarian motion to make change. And that will need to be defined, but I'd be willing to advance the idea that we could at some point create a group to define some further actions, be it symposium, be it dialogues, community activity, more. I think that to have this symposium today has been important. Everybody presented, we learned from each other, but we'll go back to our own world and to our own things that we do, and which is not small. It's a lot of effort. But why don't we join efforts and try to come to some common ground that will give us more muscle, will give us more resources, will give us more activities to look upon. So I just want to throw that as an idea I had the word committee, but a committee that would try to put together all the wonderful things that have happened here today. Just want to thank you for that.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our Zoom attendees for logging in, signing up, and staying tuned. We're just going to have some closing remarks by our wonderful Kathy Muccio.
From the Banger Center. And I just want to say thank you to everybody that is here today for being part of this symposium. And I think that, I've been an immigration lawyer forever, a really long time. And I think that one of the things that I've heard practically my whole career is that the immigration legal system, the law is broken. And I don't think that's really true. I don't think it was ever right. Broken and connotates that it was like a teapot that was intact at one point. But as we started off today, we learned that the very fundamentals of immigration law are based on the concept of exclusion,
Mhm.
of people not belonging, of people somehow being less. And that has been detrimental since day one, and it's become increasingly detrimental to the people who come to this country to contribute and to the people who are in our communities. And so when you think about that, it seems overwhelming sometimes. But I actually think, and this is why I'm so grateful that you are all here, is that this is a conference of hope. We are here to pull together, to listen to each other, and to hear people in the community who are impacted say, I am inviting you to help me be a member of your community. And for that, I thank all of you, and I hope and look forward to us joining and supporting you in the journey. So thank you all, and I look forward to continuing the dialogue.